You know, I never really expected to be given this window business. You know, when I came to Florida, I was just out of a preaching job, and I needed to provide for my family, and I didn't have any idea how I was going to do it. I was a carpenter before I left San Antonio that's where I came from. When I left San Antonio for the ministry, I was a carpenter before that, and I sold everything to be a preacher, and it didn't work out. And some of the greatest things happened to me while I was in that little journey to become a preacher. You know, it was a big act of faith. I sold everything so that I could go into the ministry, and it's interesting to even hear myself say that, because I really think and feel like it wasn't like I think a lot of people go into the ministry. I mean, what do I know? I don't know how people go into the ministry. I know how I went into the ministry. I went into the ministry because of something that happened in my life. I was searching for something. I wanted to know what it was like to become good. I didn't know what it meant to be good. I kind of did. I kind of had an idea, but as a kid and teenager and stuff like that, I was mixed up in a lot of stuff, like most kids are, and I could sense a connection between what I was doing and the results that were happening in my life. And when I asked my dad one time, I said, why is it that my life is so bad, or so hard, or so difficult? It wasn't like that it was bad. It wasn't bad, but I could feel it coming, that if I didn't make a change, if I didn't somehow correct the course that I was on, that I was going to pay. And the evidence of that had already started to manifest itself in my life. Like, jail time, fights, broken bones. I knew that if I didn't make a change, something severe was going to happen. It was like, the goads were pressing me, trying to send me a message. And I remember talking to my dad about things, and I said, Dad, why is it that my life is so bad? And I don't know if that's the exact word that I used, but I think that's the sentiment I felt. Dad, why are things so tough? What's going on? And he said, well, that's easy, son. It's because you do bad things. He said, you reap what you sow. Okay. So if the sum of my life right now is a result of the decisions that I've made, that I make, and the actions that I do in my state of mind and things like that. Well, in that, because I'm doing bad things. Well, what if I became good? And I wanted to become good. I like, okay, what if I became good? Well, how do I become good? What is good? What does it mean to be good? Jeez, I don't know. I don't know what it means to be good. I didn't know what it meant to be good. I I still don't really. I kind of do, but you know what I mean. You know what I mean. I mean, how do you know what it means to be good? I don't know. Like, what is it in me that I know what it means to be good? How is a person supposed to know? I was just born. I exist on this earth somehow, some way, and I'm supposed to know what it means to be good. I don't know. So I didn't know back then, what it meant to be good, and so I thought, well, I've heard that. I understand. It seems to me that, God is supposed to be good. I remember seeing a change in my dad growing up that I remember how it was with my dad. My dad was, it seemed like at one point in time, I can remember him, losing his temper and being angry and stuff like that. And I can remember once, I remember seeing a Bible around the house, and I noticed I seemed to make a connection between it's like there was a day when I realized that all of that with my dad stopped, and there was peace in the house somehow. I don't know, maybe even if my dad didn't feel peace, I felt something. And I made that connection between the change in my dad and the Bible that I saw around the house. And so I thought, well, maybe if I read the Bible, maybe that's it. Maybe there's something in there. The Bible is about God. My grandparents had taken me to a Methodist church when I was growing up, and I remember, little things about that, Sunday school and stuff like that. As a kid, what do you know? You hear stories and stuff. But I remember, I didn't go to church, we didn't go to church or anything, really after that. After my grandparents, I guess, stopped taking me or whatever. But I remember there was a Bible in the house, and somehow I found a Bible, and I don't know if it was my Bible or it was my dad's Bible or somebody else's Bible, but I started reading it. I started reading it because I was searching and I wanted to know what it meant to become good. What does it mean to be good? And so as I was reading it, I think maybe I started in Genesis, maybe I flipped around, but I'm assuming I started in Genesis and kind of read forward, I guess, because I can remember seeing principles in the Old Testament that made sense to me. That like things started sticking out, and I can't even describe what it was that stuck out as a principle, but I remember being affected deeply by what it was that I realized. It's like I was shown something, and I was like, and it was what I was shown. I don't even remember what it was, but I said, you know what? Okay, I understand what I was shown, I think, and I'm going to apply that in my life. And when I did, something changed. And I don't even know what it was. Something changed in me, and I was like, that's interesting. And so I kept searching, and I found something else stood out to me, and it seemed like I changed that too. And I made an adaptation. I modified my thoughts and my behaviors, and I cannot tell you what it was like to have my life turn around. I mean, I didn't go to church. I wasn't going to church. I just knew that it was so phenomenal. I was like, okay, and I started reading more and more and more, and I was hungry, and I wanted to understand what it meant to. I wanted more of this. I wanted, and I thought, And now it's, and it got to this point where it just wasn't going. I mean, I wanted more and more, and it just wasn't going fast enough. And that's when I reasoned within myself, well, there are places where other people read the Bible, and they go to church. And so I knew one person who went to church, and he didn't go to church. His parents made him go to church, and so I asked him if I could go to church with him. I guess it made him happy or whatever, but it was kind of one of those weird things, because they didn't invite me. I just asked to go because I thought maybe there I could find a teacher. Yeah, I thought maybe there I could find a teacher. And I guess I'm shaking my head because from the very beginning, it wasn't what I was experiencing in my life. I mean, there were quote unquote teachers there, but what they were teaching me and what they wanted me to know wasn't the same as what I was getting on my own, independent of going to church. But what did I know? And I started on this journey with this church, and it's so weird because there's a chasm between what I was experiencing, the change I experienced in my life, and what I saw happening or what wasn't happening in all the people around me. And I was like, what in the heck, man? Why are you folks why aren't y'all experiencing what I'm experiencing? Yeah, it was a little confusing, and I went to the preacher, and because that's what you do, right? I mean, if you've got quote unquote a spiritual problem, a spiritual question, that's who you go to, right? You go to the preacher and you say, what is this? What is this? What are these two opposing things? Why, what is it that is going on here? And and what does the preacher say? He says to me, well, maybe you need to be a preacher. Now, I did. I want to help. All I want to do is is share this change in me with others, because I mean, surely everybody's searching for this, right? Surely everybody's hungry. Everybody wants to know, everybody's, needs what it is that happened to me. Strangely, it really wasn't happening with those people at the church. The preacher says, "Hey, you ought to be a preacher." And so I thought, yeah, I ought to be a preacher. That's it. I should go to the school that he's telling me to go to so that I can be a preacher. And that's when I decided then to leave my carpentry career, which was pretty good. I was probably one of the best carpenters in San Antonio. I had just gotten off of a 1.5 year building project with country singer George Strait. I was the lead carpenter on his job for a 1.5 years. I had gone off kind of on my own, and I was doing fantastic big projects that I guess I was 25 or 26 that nobody would do. I don't know anybody now that does what I was doing as a carpenter back then, but I gave all that up so that I could go become a preacher and learn the ministry. And the idea was I was going to go and study the Bible for 4 years so that I could help people. And I did that. And the interesting thing is that the same thing that I experienced at the church, I experienced at that school. And, where there was a definite difference between what these folks over here were doing and what I was experiencing. So part of my entire existence at the school was trying to make sense of all that, and so I really just laid into the books really, really hard to try to figure out what was going on. And shoot, man, it was tough. I mean, I feel like now, looking back, I barely survived. And by the time, I graduated from there and I got my degree in biblical studies, and I went to go preach. I left Florida and went back to Fort Worth, where I got a job preaching. I was fighting for my own spiritual sanity, because I knew what had happened to me originally, but I didn't really. But it's crazy, because somehow all of that had gotten almost taken out of me, and I was a preacher for a while, and I would give these messages, but they were always cryptic, because for me it was cryptic because I couldn't really say what it was I was really thinking. And I knew, with the leadership and that kind of stuff, I always felt like I was suspect by the leadership, that if they knew what I really believed, they would kick me out in a heartbeat. But what eventually happened is, when it came to the Bible, I was able to hold my own with the Bible and the scriptures, and I knew it well enough that I was getting to the point where I could answer anything that they said. I knew all the flaws that all these flaws that I saw in everything that they said, all their doctrines, all this kind of stuff. I could poke holes in it, all this kind of stuff, and I could hold my own. I really could, and that was the end of me at that church. And they sent me packing, and that was just a real interesting that was a real interesting time, because, I had given up everything for that, and then, gosh, I didn't know what to do. Backing up a little bit, there were a lot of great things that happened to me while I was at that college. I can get into some of that kind of stuff, but the one thing that I did take with me out of there was I met my wife, and that was that was interesting, because my wife that I met there at college, she was like me in the sense that she didn't come from the same background that all those other people came from. She came from another background. And I had said to myself so many times, like, I'm not marrying one of these girls from this group, Here's this other girl. She's awesome. She's not like them. This one's for me. So, we got married, and she was with me in Fort Worth at the preaching job and went through all this stuff with me. And when I was, quote unquote, helped on my way, she went before me back to Florida because she had access to a teaching job there. She was going to finish her degree in elementary education and start teaching, and so we did that, and she got a teaching job. She went before me and had a little apartment. She got a little apartment in Tampa, where I live now, and then I put my tool bags back on and hit the streets trying to find work. And it's one thing I never did. I never did sell my tools it was like my contingency plan. If something fails with this ministry thing, I've always got my tools I can fall back on, and that's what I did. So I came back to Tampa, where I went to school, and my wife, she got a job teaching elementary school, and I made some flyers, I started walking the streets, and I started getting some work and stuff like that. And eventually, I was able to build up the business, through some, I got some pretty cool stories. I'll tell you someday about how we ended up getting this house that we got. We started off in an apartment, but eventually I was able to, with Shelly, my wife, I was able to get enough, we were able to get enough money and work together so that we could afford this house in Seminole Heights in Tampa. And it was in this historic neighborhood. I had no idea what a historic neighborhood, what the historic neighborhood was. I had worked as a carpenter in the historic neighborhoods in San Antonio. I know I had a background in historic houses. I understood historic houses. As a matter of fact, I started off working underneath historic houses doing foundation repair. I knew all about it from the ground up. I knew framing. I knew how they were built. I knew, everything about them. And while we were living there in Seminole Heights, we ended up picking up a house as an investment, and it had these old windows in it. And the old windows, I started working on them, and people started asking me, "Hey, what are you doing? Why are you working on the windows?" Well, I was working on the windows because there really wasn't anything wrong with them, and the people would insinuate, "Why don't I just replace them with these other ones? Why go through all the trouble?" I was like, "Well, it's not much trouble for me," and I started figuring out that, hey, these windows are this could be something, and I started getting into it because, well, fixing the windows is one thing, but making the parts was another thing. And I didn't know how to make the parts at the time, because it involved something called mortise and tenon joinery. The mortise and tenon joinery and cope and stick joinery and things like that I wasn't really familiar with yet, but I guess I was going to learn because there wasn't really anybody making the parts. There was this old guy named Ernie over on Florida Avenue, and he was the only one in town who could make a replica window sash. And the sash, that's the part that goes up and down on the window. And so I thought, well, maybe I can make these. And so I did a little bit of research and discovered, man, there's like houses are everywhere. And yeah, I can make these things. And so I started making I started figuring out how to make the windows. And well, and here's the thing about learning how to make the windows is, it was obvious to me how you would learn how to make one of these windows. And what I did was, well, I had the windows taken apart so I could study the parts and look at the parts. And if I needed to know how to make a certain element, I would go and study and look at how the original was put together. I figured that the originals, there was a reason behind the design of the originals. And so I wanted to replicate that. And for the most part, I got most of it right. There were some things that, I didn't exactly get perfectly right. Like I remember the first stools that I made. The first stools, and that's the interior part that goes up underneath there's a casing that goes around the window. The stool is the interior part that the casing sits on top of. Well, my stool was too thick. It was typical 2x4 thickness, right? It's supposed to be a little bit thinner. I made it 1.5 inches. It was supposed to be, I think they're supposed to be 1.125 inches. So nobody else really knew, but later on I figured it out. But that's how I learned how to make these windows. Is I learned how to make them by studying, the old house and studying how they were put together, and that's how I really got started. And I'll say that the window business was given to me. I say that, and I really believe that because, I can remember it being kind of whispered in my ear. However, the whisper happens. I didn't really have anything. I had a lot of talent. I had a lot of skills. But why windows? Well, I don't know. I don't know why windows, but it just kept on being nudged to me and nudged to me and nudged to me, and I kept trying to get out of it, trying to do other things, build decks, room additions, remodeling projects, built-in cabinets, entry doors, anything but windows full time, until it just really started to come to a head, and those goads kind of like that pushed me into the ministry to begin with. Those same kind of goads were pushing me, how do you say? They were pushing me into the windows. And I remember there was this one woman that I did work for. Her name was Joanna. And Joanna says, "Look, you need to do this." And I'm like, yeah. And I had been hearing it, from all sides. I kept getting confirmation after confirmation after confirmation that this is what I needed to be doing. And so finally, I threw my hands up in the air and I said, "Fine, yeah, I'll do it." And it was on her house that I decided that, I would do windows full time, but I really still didn't do it. And it wasn't until I really didn't go into it full time until I had a near-death experience where I was in my truck and I was on my way to do a job. There's a local contractor here, his name is Peter Carlin, and I had a little project I was doing for him. I don't even remember what it was. The day before, I had done some work in a neighborhood in St. Petersburg. I replaced a piece of glass, and in my front seat of my truck, I had this piece of glass in the front seat, like an idiot. But what did I know? You know? And I was pulling out onto this main road, and I was going to take a right. I was going to turn on, and this other car was coming and turning onto my road, and this box truck, I don't know how fast it was going, but it must be going pretty fast. It hit the other car from behind, launched that car into my driver's side door where I was sitting, and the impact knocked me over into that piece of glass, into that piece of glass, and it cut me here, all up on my arms, my legs, and I was bleeding, all over the place. I shattered the piece of glass. It was like a 1/4-inch piece of glass. It wasn't a sissy piece of glass. I mean, it was a piece of glass, man. And I don't remember even how I got out of the car, but the crazy thing was that my neighbor, whom I kind of knew barely, just happened to be there and knew my number or whatever, and called my wife and called the ambulance and had me sitting down there on the sidewalk after the wreck, and I got taken away in the ambulance. And I remember I remember calling Peter Carlin on the phone, telling him I couldn't make it to work because I had been in a freaking accident, and him saying, well, okay, and this kind of stuff. But it was so important to me to go to work that, anyway. But my truck was totaled. But before, before then, I had a truck, and it was totaled, and I guess somehow I got the trailer towed back to my house. I don't know how it all happened, how it all turned out, but it was through the insurance money that I got from that accident that I was able to get a van. And I knew I had to have a van. And I knew I had to in order to get this window business going, I knew I had to have a van. And I knew I had to have a different logo on it. And that's when it's when I got the van, my neighbor across the street, not the one who helped me, but a different neighbor, helped me out, helped me with the original design for the logo. The company was going to be woodwindowmakeover.com, because .com was a big thing back then. And so we call it Wood Window Makeover, and she designed the logo for Wood Window Makeover based on a picture of a window that I gave her, and it was a perfect logo, perfect. Blew it up real big on the side of the van, and that's really how Wood Window Makeover started. Was that, and I guess one of the lessons is, if you're being goaded into something, it's better, if you're being goaded by the Lord, that is. If you're being goaded into something and you don't go, if you're really supposed to be into that, I mean, I really feel like, the whole crash was, part of the plan to get me into the window business full time. And and I've been going ever since. And we started the Wood Window Makeover way back then. I think that was in 2008, and I had one employee. His name was Israel. Israel's still with us, as a matter of fact, and we've been going ever since. And so, And that's the story of how Window Makeover started. So, this whole enterprise for me it's an act of faith. And the gifts that I've been given to be able to do the work that I do, and I view them as gifts. I don't feel like I earned them at all. I mean, I work hard, yeah, but I don't think that I don't think that I earned what it is that I'm surrounded by. As a matter of fact, to this day, I'm still amazed at what I'm surrounded with. And so every day is kind of like an act of faith. It's a continuing of this blessing that was given to me. And that's one of the reasons why I like to teach and I like to pass on what I know. It's because I feel like that's part of the deal, is that, I was given this, and part of the deal is that I have to pass on. Freely you were given, freely you received, freely give. So that's my story. Have a great Sunday.